6:27 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, as we said before we went to that commercial break, we are joined now by the Justice Minister, Prakash Ramadhar, and getting a sense as to exactly what are the consequences, Minister, for what transpired yesterday. First of all, good morning. Good to have you on the program. What transpired over the weekend. The question should be asked first and foremost, notwithstanding the fact that we don't have a culture of resignation on principle in Trinidad and Tobago. Should you tender your resignation based on what happened?
I have seriously considered it.
Seriously?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there are things that I need to do. I will not leave a duty unattended when we are close to achieving major success. And strictly speaking, if I were to tender my resignation, which I have considered in the circumstances, then what happens? I can't be guaranteed that when we're so close to achieving a whole difference in the prisons and the way we do business.
Well, why do you say so close? Because a lot of the evidence that has come out, I mean, Facebook posts saying that indicating that they were going to have a breakout, also cell phones, people Skyping from the jail, people calling radio station from the jail, people organizing hits from the jail. Where's the evidence to say that you're so close to a major transformation?
Well, that is why when I was last here, the issue of the procurement issues, those technologies will be landed here within a couple of weeks. I understand it should be operational. I don't want to give the details of that, but certainly we've been working feverishly towards that. It's a terrible disappointment.
That sounds very hollow.
It does sound hollow, but I will tell you.
Sounds like electioneering as well.
Not at all. And that is why, since I became Minister of Justice, we have attempted to speed up these things. It cannot go on its merry old way in the normal course of things and national security issues. And that is why we try to get persons to understand they deal with life and death issues. This is not just paper. This is not just about, documentation. This is about getting things done in the shortest possible time. And I could tell you the incredible frustrations that we feel sometimes when persons do not appreciate the lack of speed on their part. What happens? I'm not casting blame to any one person, but certainly we do need to change the way we do business in Trinidad and Tobago.
Have you had any dialogue at all with the head of the Prison Officers Association, Sir Richards, because he was saying that enough is enough, basically, and they had laid certain clear deadlines. They identified 3 particular points that they wanted addressed by the end of last week. Of course, the events of Friday overtook everything else, but it seemed to reinforce what Sir Richards was saying about the state of our prisons.
Absolutely. And it's about, let me tell you, you can have the best of anything, and unless people do not do what they ought to do and fail in their duties, then the best of systems will fall. Sir will tell you well that he has an open communication with me, and what we've been able to do together has been, greatly appreciated.
But what has been done?
All right, first of all, in terms of housing and security, whilst we were in a meeting with the Minister of Housing, when a policy was being created as to how we would move further, not just for prison officers, but for law enforcement in general, and also for the short-term needs for secure housing for prison officers, we were actually coming to a very successful...
What about prison officers bearing arms?
I have given an instruction that for those who are entitled according to the protocol, they must be given. There was, once again, a hesitation because...
Hesitation by?
Some within the administration to do so.
The prisons administration?
Yes. Because there's only so much one can do. Give an instruction on the basis of what is required, and you will find all sorts of, what shall I say, resistance along the way, and for good reason in some cases. But certainly, that is a must-do. For those who are in need, they must be given some level of protection. And you would have seen in any event, the police presence outside of the prisons, all of them, in anticipation. Mr. Hackett, we had met 2 months ago to deal with a lot of those other issues. So I am not insensitive to those needs, and we see the consequence of persons not acting with the sort of speed they should.
But again, Mr. Ramadhar, what consolation can you give a society on this 25th anniversary of July 27, 1990, that we have a situation where it seems quite volatile in the prisons, that who knows, maybe there could be another situation that might arise that involves clear collusion with prisons officers or maybe police. It's a very worrying situation. What consolation can you offer?
What consolation I can offer is this, that the resources in terms of the technology and of the way we do things is about to change dramatically in the country. I do not wish to say much more, but in terms of, as we go into prosecutions and investigations, there has been a shift in the way business is being done, and that will bear itself out very soon. That didn't happen overnight. It took time, more time than we want, technology and investment in resources. This country's protective services are far more resourced ever than in the history of protective services in this country. You saw the response time. You saw what happened. You had all the assets being brought in on Friday. Within not.
That's after the fact, Minister.
After
That's
the
after
fact.
a police officer was
Absolutely,
killed.
and that is why it is so distressing that so
up.
many do such important things, put their lives on the line, and others, for one reason or the other, either by neglect or by positive criminal action, for those who we are entrusted, we have entrusted power to or authority to. And we need to fix that.
Does that speak to a failure of the system that allows individuals, either whether they be police officers, whether they be prisons officers, whoever they may be along the line, to be actually lead lives that lead towards corruption and collusion and be willing to assist prisoners? Is there a clear failure within the system?
Absolutely. Anybody who says otherwise is not living in the reality of Trinidad and Tobago.
And what is being done?
What is being done is that we are, look, in terms of the polygraphing and so, it is a must do as we move forward that every officer of the state involved in law enforcement or protection of the state must be subject to some level of screening at that level, right? In fact, we have, policy-wise, we must have, this will sound a little draconian, but you see in internal investigations in the United States, how they do things. They don't have to have a complaint from anybody else, but they examine every officer, look at their lifestyles. You do not know when you're being observed. And that if, for instance, you have greater expenditure than your income, they go after you and investigate you. These are the things that must happen, because for too long everybody talks about it. I am intent, if I should be given the opportunity to fix these things, because Trinidad and Tobago cannot go down the road as it has been for so long. And that I believe in checks and balances. Human nature is like this. It is subject to temptation and failure. And that is why you must always have a check, somebody looking on and examining you.
As someone with tremendous experience as a criminal attorney, and you would have had to be familiar with this particular environment, it appears, and you will have to correct me if I'm wrong, that the situation has gotten considerably worse rather than getting better over the last 5 years.
Well, I don't know if it's gotten worse. There are many awful things that happened, probably secretively. Things are coming out now more into the open. What happened on Friday was an extreme example of that. But there are many other things that have happened. We had, you remember, drug lords being let out in Princestown, and I could go on and on of the awfulness, right? But the time has now come, if it hadn't come before. But I am intent, if I continue in this, with the authority given, to deal with these issues. I and many others are convinced that you do need a laser focus, not on all, but on some, so that if they know that it could happen to one, it could happen to all. In terms of the investigation, in terms of the, not just the legislative tools, but certainly of the technology important.
But surely in this particular case, Minister, there would have to be a basic failure of monitoring, because if you have prisoners putting messages on Facebook that they're going to bust out of jail, how could that not be picked up when everybody else is talking about it?
And I am meeting with the Commissioner of Prisons today again for them to explain to me how it is that these things are happening, and because we keep hearing about the searches in the prisons to get the cell phones, to get the contraband, and you see a lot of successes. But what is obvious, that in the case of these particular individuals, that there was a blatant failure. How was that? Was it permitted? Was it permitted? If it was, who permitted it? And what is the consequence for that?
Is criminality
Absolutely
tolerated? See, there seems to be a tolerance level for criminality, either within the police service, either within the prison service, and there's always that suspicion that criminals are in cahoots either with important people in society to facilitate their dirty work. The wider society is very frightened.
Yeah, the wider society coming together must say, we will not tolerate this going forward. Now, this is a very dangerous kind of environmental system, because as you go into these things, you realize that, as you rightly point out, working in cahoots. It could not have been otherwise for arms and phones to come into the prison system unless there was someone or some number of persons who permitted it. But we are not going to allow that as a statement and leave it alone. Somebody has got to be held accountable. All those in that chain or line who had responsibility must have accountability. And
have you set a timeline? Have you set a deadline?
I'm meeting this morning. As we have the Crime and Justice Committee, and certainly we would appreciate that the commissioner and his officers would have had to do some investigation over the weekend. We want to report this morning as we proceed, and certainly a timeline will be set, working with the police, because they will do their part. Different organizations will do their part. All the assets of state will be brought in to find out how this happened.
Because we do have a tendency to have commissions of inquiry.
And leave it hanging, no. You know, I work, there must be a result at the end of it, and within a short period of time.
When you say short period of time, are we talking weeks, months? What
Once
sort of time?
again, I will have to rely on the investigative officers of the police and other agencies. I cannot give them a deadline. I will tell them the time frame we would like it, but they will have to do their investigations. You saw in relation to the Dana Sitahal inquiry, it took a long period of time, but it did happen, and we hope and expect that because of the level of, what shall I say, of care that one would take, especially as you go forward, because you don't want prosecutions, and I'm not speaking only to Dana Sitahal's case, as we go forward, prosecutions when they are put before court must lead to a conviction.
Because we are so close towards a general election, Minister, we can't avoid that. Is there now a greater degree of urgency to find scapegoats for this particular situation that could run in a manner that would not be allowing for due process, that the government now feels that it must identify individuals?
And there you go. When you ask if I'm going to set a deadline, I do not. It's up to the authorities to do their work. Let me make something abundantly clear. This government has taken a position that we do not interfere with the organs of state in the work that they do. I am convinced that we have to build institutions without interference. So when we talk about scapegoating, that's an easy way out. And when persons are held and prosecuted, it's easy for them to say, oh, I am just being used as a scapegoat, or there's election. We have nothing to do with that other than to give the resources to this institution of state to do their work. And so maybe it happened in the past where a prime minister could have told a high-level police officer what to do. We do not do these things. They come to us at National Security Council and say, look, we need these resources through the ministry and through the minister, and we give them the resources to do their work.
That point is taken, but what do you do if it's clear that some arm of the state or the protective service are dragging their feet on a particular issue willfully?
Yeah, and the line minister is entitled to ask questions, right? But there is, for instance, in the Police Service Commission, right, who has responsibility now for any indiscipline or any wrongdoing or whatever like that. But one has to be very careful that you do not attempt, by the very thing, to say that you're interfering with the day-to-day operational work of any institution, in particular the police, who must always be very, very independent. We've seen in the past evidence of almost political persecution in some cases in the past. We have to avoid these things as we go forward, so that no man or woman is above the law, including those who populate those institutions. This is not an easy thing, because there's a societal change that we're looking towards. As you say, the ease by which we accept that there will be collusion between criminal-minded persons and persons who are given state responsibility. We cannot permit that as easy, casual conversation. Something has to be done about it. And the Attorney General and I, we have discussed already certain plans as to how we can deal with it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Other societies have been through this. Even the most developed of societies still are dealing with these things. But we just cannot allow it to continue like that.
Mr.
You have my
Ramadhar.
commitment.
Mr. Ramadhar, thanks very much. Time has
God
run
bless.
out. And I
Thank
know
you
you
very
have another assignment to attend
Yes,
to this
yes.
morning. I do appreciate you joining
Thank
us
you.
this morning. First up, to give us your perspective on this very troubling development over the weekend, and indeed with the anniversary of July 27, 1990 being marked today. There seems to be a particular relevance to the entire situation right now. 6:41 coming up towards 6:42. We'll be back right after this.